Welcome back to Griffonomics. This is the place where we don't just read the headlines, we conduct a financial investigation. We always define the risk before we even start to think about the reward.
It's the only way to do it.
And today we are opening a file that feels like it's been ripped straight from a sci-fi novel, but it's dominating the economic forecast right now.
It really is.
We are talking about the zero-wage economy and the high-stakes gamble of universal basic income.
It is a gamble.
Mhm.
And it's one where the odds are looking, increasingly unfavorable, at least if you care about long-term economic stability.
I feel like UBI, universal basic income, is one of those ideas that everyone has an extremely strong opinion on, usually based on, like, zero data.
Oh, absolutely. It's all feeling, no facts.
Right. It's either the socialist utopia where we all paint landscapes while robots do the heavy lifting, or it's the end of civilization as we know it.
There's no middle ground in the public debate.
But today, our mission is to cut through that noise. We are not interested in the philosophy. We are interested in the mechanics. We have a stack of fascinating sources here, including a brand new, massive study from Open Research, the Vivault et al. Study.
A really important one.
Yeah, it's essentially a stress test for UBI in the real world, and we're pairing that with some heavy macroeconomic theory from Lance Roberts at Real Investment Advice.
Exactly. And the picture that emerges when you combine those two perspectives, the micro data from the study and the macro theory from the markets, is what we're calling the productivity welfare paradox.
The productivity welfare paradox.
That sounds awesome.
That sounds ominous. Let's unpack that right at the top. What exactly is the paradox here?
It's a structural flaw in the logic of UBI. The core argument we're going to explore is that UBI is frequently touted as the default safety net for when AI takes our jobs.
Hmm.
The logic seems simple, right?
Robots make the money, humans get the checks.
That's the bumper sticker version. But the synthesis of this data reveals that UBI stimulates consumption. It gives people money to spend without a corresponding increase in human production.
Okay, so you have more money chasing the same amount of goods.
Or fewer goods,
Hmm.
potentially. And when you do that, you risk a permanent inflationary spiral and, perhaps more dangerously, the erosion of the workforce itself. It's a paradox because the policy designed to, increase welfare.
Right, to help people.
It actually undermines the very economic engine required to fund that welfare in the first place.
So we're not just talking about the old cliche of people getting lazy. We're talking about the fundamental mechanics of the economy potentially breaking down.
Precisely. It's a systemic risk, not just a behavioral one.
Okay, so before we get to the solution, or the proposed solution of UBI, we have to understand the problem. The catalyst here is artificial intelligence. We've heard the buzzwords, we've seen the headlines, but what does AI actually do to the labor market that makes it different from, say, a tractor or a spreadsheet?
The key term you'll see in the research is the zero-wage worker.
The zero-wage worker. I circled that in the notes. It sounds like a corporate consultant's dream and a worker's nightmare. Who are they?
Well, that's the thing. It's not a who, it's a what. To understand why this is so different, you have to look at economic history. Think about the Industrial Revolution.
Okay.
Machines, steam engines, assembly lines, they made human labor more efficient. But crucially, they aided the worker. The tractor didn't replace the farmer. It allowed one farmer to do 10 times as much work. The worker was still the pilot.
Right. And because that worker was suddenly way more productive, the worker became more valuable, and wages, historically speaking anyway, went up. That's the standard deal. I make more widgets for you, you pay me more money.
Exactly. That is the fundamental labor capital contract that built the middle class.
But AI is different. It's a different beast entirely. AI acts as a substitute, not an aid.
A substitute. It doesn't just help you write the code. It writes the code. It doesn't just help a paralegal sort documents. It analyzes the documents. It operates 247. It requires no benefits, no pension, no bathroom breaks, and most importantly, no salary.
It is a worker with a wage of zero.
That's it. It's the ultimate employee from a corporate profit perspective.
From a pure efficiency standpoint, yes. And we're not talking theory anymore.
Not at all. We have hard data on this now.
Yeah.
JP Morgan Chase recently reported on their internal AI adoption. This isn't theoretical. This is happening inside one of the world's biggest banks right now.
And what did they find?
They found that in certain operations, AI didn't just nudge productivity, it doubled the productivity gains. They were seeing gains of, say, 3% a year, and with AI, it jumped to 6%.
Doubled. Okay.
And in some specific roles, the efficiency increases were just staggering, 40 to 50%.
That is massive. I mean, if I'm a business owner and I can get a 50% efficiency boost without paying overtime or hiring anyone new, that's a no-brainer.
It's an economic imperative at that point.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Isn't efficiency good? If we can make things cheaper and faster, shouldn't we all be celebrating? Where's the downside?
In a vacuum, yes, efficiency is fantastic.
Yeah.
But here is the catch. This creates what we're calling the efficiency gap.
The efficiency gap.
We measure productivity as output per unit of input. Usually when productivity goes up, wages go up because human labor is the primary input driving that production. But what if the input is software, not human sweat?
Then the link is broken.
The link is broken.
Yeah.
The profit from that efficiency gain, it doesn't automatically flow to the person who used to do the job.
So it goes to the person who owns the software, the owner of the capital.
Exactly. The prosperity generated by that efficiency doesn't naturally flow back to workers in the form of wages. It stays with capital. Yeah. And this divergence isn't entirely new. You can see charts where productivity has outpaced wage growth since the late 1970s. But AI puts that trend on steroids. It creates an explosion in that gap, a wealth decoupling.
And that terror, the fear that human labor is no longer the primary driver of production, is what leads policymakers to panic. They look at that widening gap and they say, okay, the traditional job market is broken, the ladder is gone, we need a new tool.
A completely new tool. Because the old ones, like unemployment insurance, they were designed for a cyclical economy, not a structural transformation like this.
And that's where the call for UBI gets really loud. The narrative becomes, the robots took the jobs, so just send us the checks. It feels simple. It feels fair on the surface.
It feels like a surrender, almost.
A surrender? How so?
Surrender is actually the word used in some of our source analysis. It's an admission that we, as a society, cannot find a productive place for human labor in this new economy. It's giving up on adaptation.
Like, we can't fix the job market, so here's some cash to keep you quiet and out of the way.
That's the cynical take. But it's not entirely wrong. But before we accept that surrender, we have to ask the hard question. Does sending those checks actually work? Does it create a stable, thriving society? Or does it create a dependent class on an economic precipice?
And that brings us to the empirical reality. We're not just theorizing here. We have the Vivault et al. Study. Now, for you listening, when you hear the word study, your eyes might glaze over, but explain why this one is such a big deal. This wasn't some Twitter poll.
No, this is the gold standard. It was a massive randomized controlled trial, an RCT run by Open Research. This is how we test life-saving drugs. You don't just ask people what they would do if you gave them money.
Right.
You actually give them the money. And you measure the results against a control group that didn't get it. It removes all the bias.
So you get the difference between what I think I would do versus what I actually do.
Exactly. And the setup was robust. This study took place in Illinois and Texas. They had 3,000 participants, mostly low-income individuals aged 21 to 40.
So prime working age. These are not retirees we're talking about.
Prime working age. They split them into two groups. The treatment group received $1,000 a month for 3 years, unconditional, no strings attached.
$1,000 a month.
And the control group received $50 a month, which was basically just an incentive to keep filling out the surveys so they could have a clean comparison.
I want to pause on that number. $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. That is not pocket change. For a low-income household, that is a mortgage payment in some parts of the country. It's rent. It's groceries for a family. The notes say it was roughly a 40% income boost for the average household in this study.
It is a life-changing amount of money, absolutely. And the proponents of UBI, they have a name for this. They call it venture capital for the people.
Venture capital for the people. I've heard that.
Yeah, the idea is that poverty is a trap.
Yeah.
It takes up so much mental bandwidth just to survive, paying bills, figuring out where the next meal comes from, that you can't plan for the future.
You're stuck in survival mode.
Exactly. So the theory goes, if we give people this financial cushion, this breathing room, they won't stop working. They'll work better. They'll use the money to upgrade their skills, start a small business, find a better job. It's a better fit.
That's the dream, right? That you're not just giving a handout, you're unleashing human potential. We want to believe that if you take the boot off someone's neck, they will sprint.
That is the hope. That is the entire premise.
But we're looking at the data here, and the sprint didn't happen.
No, it really didn't. The data showed a significant income efficiency loss. This is a crucial metric for anyone interested in the economics of this.
Okay, income efficiency loss. Break that down for us.
For every $1 the researchers transferred to a household, total household earned income, that's money from jobs, not the UBI, fell by approximately 21 to 28 cents.
Wait, let me make sure I'm getting the math right. If the government gives me a dollar, I don't just have that dollar plus my old salary. I actually go out and earn 21 to 28 cents less on my own.
That's correct. You are effectively spending 21 to 28 cents of that government dollar to buy yourself time off.
So the net gain isn't a dollar, it's closer to 70 cents because you've pulled back from the labor force to get it.
Precisely. The study measured this directly. They found that participants who got the money reduced their work by about 1.3 to 1.4 hours per week on average.
And I can hear the critics already. 1.3 hours, that's nothing. That's leaving a little early on a Friday.
Individually, it seems small, but you have to look at the aggregate effect. That's what matters for policy. When you look at the employment rates, they dropped by 2.0 percentage points according to the surveys.
Okay.
And if you look at the hard administrative data, the unemployment insurance records, which are more reliable employment, dropped by 4.1 percentage points.
4%. So when you scale a 4% drop in employment across an entire national economy, that is a massive contraction in labor supply.
That is millions and millions of people exiting the workforce. It's not a rounding error. It's a seismic shift.
And there was a detail in the study that really, it just blew my mind. It wasn't just the person getting the check who slowed down.
Right, the spillover effect,
Oh.
or what the researchers called the partner effect. This is fascinating sociologically. The partners of the recipients, husbands, wives, cohabitating partners who didn't get the check directly, also reduced their work hours by a comparable amount.
So if my wife gets the check, I decide to work less too. It's contagious.
It's a household utility decision. The household as a unit looks at the total pot of money and says, we have an extra $1,000 coming in. We don't both need to grind so hard. Let's both take our foot off the gas.
So it effectively doubled the labor withdrawal per household.
That's exactly what happened. So instead of one person stepping back a little, the whole household unit stepped back significantly. The impact was twice what you'd expect if you only looked at the recipient.
That just flies in the face of the argument that this money would be used to power up a household. It sounds much more like they use it to power down.
Which leads us directly to the leisure substitution trap. This is the second major finding from the Vivolt study. We have to ask the critical question. Where did all that free time go? If they aren't working those 1.3 hours, what are they doing instead?
The optimist in me, and the UBI marketing brochure, says they are volunteering at the soup kitchen, they are spending more quality time with their kids, they are learning to code on Coursera, they are hitting the gym to get healthy for their new, better job.
And the data says no.
Ouch, just a flat no.
Essentially, yes. The study tracked time use very, very carefully through detailed surveys. And the time that was freed up from work was primarily allocated to leisure.
What kind of leisure?
Specifically social and solo leisure activities, which is a clinical way of saying watching TV, hanging out with friends, playing video games, relaxing.
Okay, and to be fair, leisure is nice. We all like leisure. I'm not judging the individual choice. But from an economic productivity standpoint.
From a productivity standpoint, it's a null result. There was no statistically significant increase in time spent on childcare. None. No significant increase in volunteering. No increase in job searching. And no increase in exercise or other self-improvement activities.
That is just devastating for the friction argument. The idea that I just need a little cash to give me the breathing room to find a better job. I've heard that argument 1,000 times.
We all have.
I can't quit my terrible job to look for a good one because I live paycheck to paycheck.
You're saying that when they got the financial cushion, they didn't use it to find the good job.
They did not. In fact, the friction seemed to work the opposite way. The cash made it easier to not look for work.
How so?
The study found that the treated participants, the ones getting the money, actually applied to fewer jobs and had fewer interviews compared to the control group who got almost nothing.
Fewer. Not just the same number, but fewer.
Fewer. And as a result, their unemployment duration, if they lost a job, increased by roughly 0.8 months. That's about 3.5 weeks longer out of work.
So they weren't being choosier about the jobs they took. They were just being slower about looking for one in the first place. And the outcome confirms that. The expert analysis in the source material details what they call a quality of employment index. They measured everything.
Like what?
Wages, benefits, scheduling flexibility, job safety, commute time, you name it. If the friction argument were true, we would expect to see recipients eventually landing jobs that were better on these metrics after their longer search. But the study found null results across the board. Wages didn't go up, job satisfaction didn't go up, they didn't transition into roles with better amenities or more predictable hours. Nothing.
So let me just recap this because it's pretty staggering. They worked less. They earned less on their own. Their partners also worked less. They took longer to find a new job. And when they did find one, it was no better than the job they would have gotten otherwise.
That is the empirical reality of this specific large-scale trial. And it forces us to confront, a basic aspect of human nature. The economists running this study noted that for this demographic, the marginal value of leisure was higher than the marginal value of consumption.
Meaning they'd rather have the time off than the extra stuff they could buy?
Essentially, yes.
Right.
They chose to buy time off rather than buy more goods or invest in their future earnings potential.
Which, on an individual level, I get it. I totally understand. If you're working a tough, low-wage job and someone hands you $1,000, maybe you do just want to sit on the porch for a few extra hours a week. But if you build a national economic policy on that assumption and everyone decides to sit on the porch.
Well, the porch eventually collapses because no one is building porches anymore.
Exactly. But before we get to the macro collapse, I want to touch on the psychological aspect, because surely, even if they aren't working more or getting better jobs, they must be happier. $1,000 a month has to buy some peace of mind.
It does. But only briefly. This is what we call the fade-out effect.
The novelty wears off.
Rapidly. The study showed that subjective well-being, mental health scores, stress levels, they all did improve in year one. There was a genuine, measurable boost. You pay off some credit card debt, you fix the car, you breathe easier.
That makes sense.
But by year 2 and year 3, all of those positive effects had faded.
Yeah.
The levels reverted right back to where the control group was.
So they were no happier than the people getting just $50 a month.
Correct. And this is a classic psychological phenomenon. It's the hedonic treadmill.
Right, we just adapt to our new normal, no matter how good it is.
We adapt incredibly quickly. You get the money, you feel safer, you adjust your lifestyle and your spending habits, and suddenly that extra $1,000 isn't a bonus anymore. It's just your baseline. And once it's the baseline, it doesn't bring you active joy.
But there's a deeper issue here that the sources highlight, isn't there? It's not just about the money.
No. It's that financial support alone cannot replace the psychological and social benefits of employment.
Right. The sense of purpose, the place to go in the morning. The answer to the question, so what do you do at a party?
Exactly. Work provides structure, it provides community, even if you dislike your coworkers, and it provides a core part of your identity.
Yeah.
A check in the mail provides none of that. And when you remove the work but keep the check, you don't necessarily end up with a happier person. You often end up with a person who feels adrift.
There was one statistic in the psychological section that really jumped out at me, and honestly, it's a bit uncomfortable to talk about. The disability reporting.
Yes, this is the disability reporting anomaly.
Ah.
This is a really surprising finding. The study found that the treated participants, the ones getting the money, were 4.2 percentage points more likely to report having a disability that limited their ability to work compared to the control group.
That is strange. Did the money somehow make them sick?
No, of course not.
Yeah.
The researchers dig into this, and they offer a couple of potential explanations based on the data. One explanation is actually positive.
Okay.
It's possible the money gave them access to health care. They could finally afford to see a doctor and get properly diagnosed for underlying conditions they had been ignoring for years.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Right. Access to care.
But that effect seemed to fade by the end of the study, and the nature of the reporting suggests something else might be at play. A psychological mechanism called self-signaling.
Self-signaling. What does that mean in this context?
It's a way to mitigate social stigma. In our society, there is a very strong social norm that able-bodied adults should work. If you are taking money and not working, that can create a lot of internal conflict, a lot of cognitive dissonance. It feels uncomfortable, both to yourself and when you have to explain it to your friends and neighbors.
So if I'm not working because I'm getting the UBI check and I'm spending my time on leisure, I might subconsciously start to identify with or lean into the label of being disabled to justify my unemployment.
Precisely. It provides a socially acceptable justification. I'm not idling. I'm unable to work. It's a defense mechanism against the loss of identity that comes with withdrawing from the labor force.
That is profound and honestly a little heartbreaking. It shows how deeply tied our sense of self-worth is to productivity in our culture. If we take away the job, people will find a medical reason to explain why they aren't contributing, rather than just admit they're choosing leisure.
It's a powerful finding, and it transitions us perfectly to the macro risk. Because if you have millions of people withdrawing from labor, leaning into leisure, relying on government transfers, you eventually run headfirst into the laws of physics, or rather the laws of economics.
Let's bring in Lance Roberts' analysis here. We're moving from the individual V-Vault study to the entire U.S. economy. You mentioned the productivity welfare paradox at the top. How does that play out on a national stage?
It comes down to a core economic rule that Roberts emphasizes in his work, and it's one that a lot of modern monetary theorists often try to ignore or downplay.
Which is,
Production must precede consumption.
you have to make the bread before you can eat the bread. Simple as that.
Exactly. You cannot eat money. Money is just a claim check on real goods and services. If a national UBI program gives everyone more claim checks, more consumption, but people are working less and therefore producing fewer goods and services, you have a fundamental imbalance.
Too much money chasing too few goods. That is the textbook definition of inflation.
It is the inflationary trap. And the best part is, we don't have to guess if this would happen. We have a perfect real-world proxy from just a few years ago, the 2020 and 2021 stimulus checks.
The pandemic stimulus, that was basically a temporary nationwide UBI pilot program.
It really was. We injected massive amounts of cash, that is, demand, into the economy. At the very same time, production supply was constrained because of lockdowns and supply chain issues. What happened?
Prices went through the roof, inflation hit 40-year highs, used cars cost more than new cars, a carton of eggs was like gold bullion. It was chaos.
And that inflation completely eroded the value of the checks themselves. This is the sugar rush that Roberts talks about. You get a momentary spike in GDP and spending a sugar high, but then prices rise to absorb all that extra liquidity. The economy just normalizes to a new, higher price level.
So the purchasing power of that UBI transfer is effectively neutralized?
It gets eaten alive. In the end, you're not actually richer. You just have more zeros on the bills in your wallet, but you can buy the same amount of stuff.
Or, as you said before, maybe even less stuff, because as the V-Vault study established, overall production has actually stalled or fallen because people stopped working as much.
Exactly. You get the worst of both worlds. Higher prices and lower output. Stagflation.
Yeah.
And then you have to pay the bill. The fiscal impossibility.
The price tag. This is the part that always seems to get waved away in the debate.
Because the numbers are terrifying. A national UBI program would require trillions of dollars annually. And Roberts points out a stat that should keep you up at night. Currently, 90% of federal revenue is already spent on mandatory safety nets. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on the national debt.
90%. So we only have 10 cents of every tax dollar for everything else. The military, infrastructure, education, all of it.
Everything. We are already maxed out. So to fund UBI, you have two choices. You either tax the absolute living daylights out of everyone and everything, or you print money until the printing presses melt. And both of those options are catastrophic for long-term economic growth.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you have massive new taxes, you crush the incentive to invest and innovate. If you tax the AI companies 90% to pay for the UBI checks, they'll stop building the AI. Then you lose the very productivity engine that was supposed to pay for the UBI in the first place.
It's a death spiral. You kill the goose that lays the golden egg to pay for the omelets.
That's a very apt analogy. And if you go the other route and just print the money, you get the hyperinflation we just discussed, which renders the UBI worthless anyway. There's no fiscal escape hatch.
So this paints a pretty bleak picture. UBI seems to create a labor withdrawal. It doesn't improve job quality. The happiness it provides fades away. People start identifying as disabled to cope with the stigma, and it bankrupts the country while causing runaway inflation.
It sounds like a trap.
It is a trap. That's the conclusion the data points toward.
But we still have the problem of the zero-wage worker. The robots are coming. AI is getting more powerful every day. If UBI isn't the answer, are we just supposed to tell people to starve? Are we just supposed to say, well, tough luck, the algorithm does your job better now?
No. And this is where the conversation needs to shift critically. We need to move from passive welfare to active labor policy.
Active versus passive. Explain the difference for us. UBI is passive. It's a check. It says, here is money, good luck, we hope you figure it out. It's unconditional. Active policy says, here are resources and incentives specifically designed to help you adapt and stay valuable in the changing economy.
So it's a hand up, not a handout.
That's the classic framing, yes. The experts we're citing argue that defaulting to UBI is an admission of policy failure. It's saying we surrender to the disruption. The alternative is to actively manage the disruption.
So what are the specific tools in that active toolkit? If we aren't mailing checks to everyone, what are we doing instead?
There are three main pillars that come up again and again in the research: wage insurance, retraining grants, and mobility support.
Okay, let's take wage insurance first. That sounds interesting. Is that like car insurance, but for my paycheck?
It's a similar concept. One of the biggest fears workers have is not just losing a job, but the massive income drop that comes with the next one. Let's say Bob is a welder in a factory making $30 an hour. A robot arm takes his job. Bob looks at the market, and the only job he can find right away is a service job paying, say, $18 an hour.
That is a humiliation, and it's a financial disaster for his family. Bob probably just stays on unemployment, holding out for another $30 job that might never come back.
Exactly. He exits the workforce,
Yeah.
maybe for good. Wage insurance changes that math completely. It says, Bob, take the $18 job. For a set period, like 2 or 3 years, the government will subsidize the difference, maybe paying you an extra $10 an hour.
So Bob is now making $28 an hour. He's almost back to whole, but he's working.
Right. Instead of paying him 100% of unemployment to sit at home, we're paying a fraction of that to keep him in the workforce. It prevents the income shock, but crucially, it keeps Bob attached to the labor market. He is still working, still networking, still building skills. He isn't disabled or idle. He preserves his identity and his dignity.
That makes a ton of sense. It keeps the motor running instead of letting it go cold. What about retraining? I feel like learn to code has become a bit of a meme, a joke almost. We told coal miners to learn to code and it didn't really happen. Does retraining actually work?
It can, but only if it's targeted and practical. And the Vivault study, for all its negative results, actually had a small nugget of hope here.
No.
While the overall results on education and enrollment were null, there was one exception: the younger participants.
20-somethings.
Yes. Participants aged 20 to 29 were statistically more likely to enroll in post-secondary education or a certification program when they got the cash. This suggests that for young people who have a long career runway ahead of them, unconditional money is sometimes used for investment. But for older, more established workers, it wasn't.
So a blanket one-size-fits-all UBI fails because it treats a 50-year-old laid-off factory worker the same as a 22-year-old gig worker.
Exactly. But maybe targeted grants. Here is a voucher specifically for this community college welding certification or this nursing program would work far better than just, here is cash, do whatever you want with it.
So you subsidize skill acquisition, not just consumption.
That's the key. And the third pillar is mobility support.
Helping people move to where the jobs are.
Right now, we have a housing crisis and very high moving costs. Sometimes the jobs aren't gone from the economy. They just aren't here anymore. They're in a different state or a different city where a new industry is booming. Helping workers and their families physically move to where labor demand is high is a very high return investment for the whole economy.
All three of these things, wage insurance, retraining, mobility, they connect back to a concept you mentioned in our pre-show notes, preserving the labor signal.
This is vital. In a market economy, wages are a signal. They're a piece of information. High wages in a certain field tell a worker, society needs this skill right now. Come here, this is valuable. Low or falling wages say, we have enough of this, go somewhere else.
It's the market's traffic light system. Green light, red light.
Perfect analogy. UBI dulls that signal. It puts a fog over the traffic lights. If I get $1,000 a month no matter what, I might ignore the flashing red light in my dying industry or the bright green light in a new city. I just stay put.
Because the pain of staying isn't as great.
Right. But active policy like wage insurance and mobility support does the opposite. It helps workers follow the signal. It greases the wheels of adaptation rather than taking the wheels off the car entirely.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about agility. UBI promotes stagnation. Active policy promotes agility.
And in an age of rapid AI development, agility is survival.
So we've looked at the zero-wage worker, we've stress-tested UBI with the Vivault study, we've seen the inflationary sugar rush, and now the active alternatives. It's time for a final verdict. How do we sum all this up for you, the listener, who is trying to figure out what to vote for or how to prepare your own family for this future?
The synthesis of the Vivault study's micro-level data and Lance Roberts' macroeconomic theory points to one pretty clear conclusion. UBI, as it's currently proposed, creates a negative multiplier effect.
A negative multiplier. You get out less than you put in.
Exactly. You put $1 of taxpayer money or debt in, and you get less than $1 of real economic value out. You get debt, you get inflation, and you get a smaller, less productive workforce. Prosperity requires production. That is the iron law of economics. You cannot consume what you have not first produced.
So the idea that we can just print our way to a techno-paradise while the robots do all the work it's a fantasy.
It is a dangerous fantasy. Human labor must adapt to the machine age, not be paid to exit from it. The goal of public policy should be to keep humans relevant, productive, and engaged, not to turn us into a permanent leisure class funded by a mountain of debt that will eventually collapse under its own weight.
It's a powerful reality check. We often look for the easy button, the send check button, but the data shows the easy button is broken. The hard work of adaptation is the only way through.
That's the core lesson from all this material.
Well, that gives us plenty to think about. It's definitely not the utopian answer some people might want, but here at Griffonomics, we prefer the hard truth over the comfortable lie. We've defined the risk stagnation, inflation, and a loss in purpose. Now the reward lies in how we choose to adapt.
Well said.
Thank you for walking us through that depth dive. And to you listening, thanks for trusting us with your time. Keep questioning the narrative and always, always look at the data.
Yep.
Risk defined, portfolio protected. We'll see you next time.